Get up, old man. You can't just sit here all day. The voice sliced through the bustling hum of the shopping mall like a serrated blade, sharp and dripping with disdain. It belonged to a mall cop, barely out of his 20s, his uniform crisp, but his posture radiating arrogance. His name tag gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Officer J. Carter. The words hit their mark. A 73-year-old veteran named Samuel Sam Whitaker, seated quietly on a worn bench near the food court, his weathered hands folded over a small faded photograph of a young Marine in dress blues. The mall was alive with the chaos of a Saturday afternoon in suburban Virginia. Families shuffled past with overflowing shopping bags. Teenagers laughed too loudly over their iced coffees, and the air carried the mingled scents of pretzels, pizza grease, and cheap perfume. Sam, his silver hair cropped short and his posture still hinting at military discipline, had been sitting for maybe 10 minutes lost in thought. He'd come to the mall not to shop, but to help. A young mother had dropped her toddler's toy nearby, and Sam, with a warm smile, had retrieved it from under a table, dusting it off before handing it back. The mother's grateful nod had felt like a small victory, a fleeting reminder of a life spent serving others. But now, Officer Carter loomed over him, his shadow darkening the bench, his radio crackling with static as if amplifying his impatience. Sam blinked, the officer's words sinking in like a punch he hadn't braced for. His chest tightened, not from anger, not yet, but from the sting of humiliation. He'd seen combat in Vietnam, carried wounded comrades through jungles thick with danger, earned a Purple Heart for a shrapnel wound that still ached in the rain. And now here he was, reduced to an old man cluttering up a mall bench. The photograph in his hands, his best friend Tommy, killed in '68, felt heavier, its edges worn from years of quiet reflection. Sam's fingers tightened around it, grounding him as he met Carter's glare. "I'm not causing trouble, son," he said, his voice low but steady, the kind of calm forged in chaos. "Just resting a moment." Carter scoffed, volcano rolling his eyes. "Rest somewhere else. This ain't a nursing home." A small crowd began to gather, shoppers pausing, their curiosity piqued by the confrontation. A teenage girl pulled out her phone, filming, her friend whispering, "Is that guy in trouble?" A middle-aged man in a polo shirt muttered about lazy security, but did nothing to intervene. The air grew thick with tension, the chatter of the mall fading into a dull roar in Sam's ears. He felt exposed, like a spotlight had pinned him down in enemy territory. His heart raced, not from fear but from the weight of injustice. This wasn't just about a bench. It was about being dismissed, erased, after a lifetime of sacrifice. Sam's mind flickered to a memory. 1969, a humid night in Da Nang. Tommy's laughter cutting through the tension before a patrol. That same laughter had carried Sam through the worst days of his life, and now, clutching the photo, he felt Tommy's absence like a fresh wound. He wanted to stand, to walk away with dignity, but his knees ached, and the bench was a small anchor in a world that felt increasingly hostile. Carter stepped closer, his hand resting on his radio, his tone growing sharper. "I said move or I'll make you move." The threat hung in the air, and Sam's jaw tightened. He wasn't a stranger to bullies, but this one wore a badge and thought it gave him power. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. A woman with a stroller hesitated, her eyes darting between Sam and the officer. "He's not hurting anyone," she said softly, but Carter shot her a look that silenced her. Sam's gaze dropped to the photograph again, Tommy's young face staring back, a reminder of who he'd been, and who he still was. He wasn't just some old man. He was a Marine, damn it, and Marines don't back down. But the weight of Carter's words, the stares of the crowd, and the ache in his bones made him feel small, insignificant. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe he was in the way, maybe he didn't belong here. Then a sound broke through the tension, a low, rhythmic thud, like boots on pavement, growing louder from the mall's main entrance. Heads turned, and Sam's eyes lifted, catching a glimpse of movement through the glass doors. Something was happening, something big, but he couldn't yet make sense of it. The crowd shifted, their attention pulled away from the bench, and Carter's smirk faltered for a split second. Sam's heart thudded, not with fear now, but with a spark of something else, hope maybe, or defiance. "We're just getting started with this story, but trust me, it's about to get even more intense. Stick around to see what happens when Sam faces even greater injustice, and how he fights back." The rhythmic thud of boots grew louder, echoing off the polished tiles of the mall's main corridor, but Officer Carter didn't notice, or didn't care. His focus was locked on Sam Whitaker, the 73-year-old veteran still seated on the bench, clutching the faded photograph of his fallen friend Tommy. The air in the food court was thick with the smell of fried food and the buzz of whispered gossip from the growing crowd. Shoppers craned their necks, some clutching shopping bags, others holding up phones to capture the unfolding drama. Sam's heart pounded, not from fear but from a rising tide of indignation. He'd faced worse than this punk in a rent-a-cop uniform, mortars, ambushes, the screams of men in jungles half a world away. But this moment, this public shaming, cut deeper than shrapnel ever had. Carter leaned in closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's that, old man? You deaf now too?" "I said move." He jabbed a finger toward Sam, his radio crackling as if egging him on. The crowd's murmurs swelled, a mix of unease and morbid curiosity. A young barista from the nearby coffee stand, her apron stained with espresso, muttered, "This is messed up," but her words were lost in the noise. Sam's eyes flicked to the photograph in his hands. Tommy's frozen smile a stark contrast to the hostility bearing down on him. He wanted to stand, to shove Carter's arrogance back in his face, but his knees trembled and the weight of the crowd's stares pinned him in place. Doubt gnawed at him. Had he really become this frail, this invisible? "I fought for this country," Sam said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet fury that made a few onlookers flinch. "I earned the right to sit here." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. But Carter laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that grated against the mall's artificial cheer. "Yeah? Well, your war stories don't pay the rent here, Grandpa." He reached for Sam's arm, his grip rough, yanking the veteran halfway to his feet. The photograph slipped from Sam's fingers, fluttering to the floor, and a gasp rippled through the crowd. A teenage boy in a hoodie stepped forward, hesitating, then picked it up, holding it out to Sam with wide eyes. "Sir, you dropped this," he said softly, but Carter barked, "Back off, kid!" The boy retreated, clutching his phone tighter, still filming. Sam's chest burned with a mix of shame and rage. He pulled his arm free, his movement slow but deliberate, and took the photo back, his fingers brushing the boy's. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking just enough to betray the storm inside him. The memory of Tommy flooded back, a night in '69, pinned down by gunfire, Tommy's hand gripping his, promising they'd make it out alive. Only one of them had. Now, decades later, Sam felt that same desperation, that same need to hold on. But Carter wasn't done. He stepped closer, his boots scuffing the tile, and shoved Sam's shoulder, not hard enough to knock him over, but enough to make him stumble. "You're making a scene," Carter hissed. "Last chance to walk away before I drag you out." The crowd's reaction was a mixed chorus. Some gasped, others whispered, and one woman clutching a toddler shouted, "Leave him alone!" Her voice was drowned out by a group of teenagers cheering Carter on, their laughter like nails on a chalkboard. Sam's vision blurred, not from tears but from the weight of it all, the disrespect, the dismissal, the way the world seemed to have forgotten what he'd given. He straightened, his back aching but his resolve hardening. "You don't get to touch me," he said, his voice low, each word carved from years of discipline. Carter froze, caught off guard by the steel in Sam's tone, but before he could respond, the thudding boots from the corridor reached a crescendo. Through gate the glass doors a group of men and women appeared, veterans, their faces weathered but resolute, some in leather vests adorned with military patches, others in faded caps with unit insignias. They moved with purpose, their steps synchronized, a living echo of the discipline Sam had once known. Leading them was a tall woman, her gray hair pulled back, a Marine Corps pin gleaming on her jacket. Her name was Colonel Elena Martinez, retired, but her presence commanded the room like she was still calling shots in a war zone. She'd been at a nearby VFW meeting when a text from the teenage boy's video hit their group chat, spreading like wildfire. "What the hell is going on here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the crowd like a blade. Heads turned, phones swiveled, and Carter's smirk vanished. Sam's breath caught. He didn't know these people, but he recognized the look in their eyes. The same fire that had carried him through Vietnam, the same loyalty that bound Marines across generations. Martinez's gaze locked onto Carter, who shifted uncomfortably, his hand dropping from his radio. "This man's a veteran," she said, pointing at Sam, her voice rising. "You think you can shove him around like he's nothing?" The crowd parted and the veterans fanned out, forming a loose semicircle around the bench. Sam's heart thudded, a mix of relief and disbelief. He wasn't alone, not anymore. Carter stammered. "He was loitering. It's my job to—" Martinez cut him off, stepping closer. "Your job? Your job is to protect people, not harass them." The crowd was buzzing now, phones capturing every word, every glance. A man in a wheelchair, his cap emblazoned with Desert Storm, rolled forward, his voice gravelly but firm. "That man's a hero. You owe him an apology." The words landed like a grenade and Carter's face reddened. He opened his mouth to argue, but the weight of the veteran's presence, 20, maybe 30 of them now, silenced him. Sam clutched Tommy's photo, his fingers trembling not from weakness but from the surge of something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. The tension was electric, the air crackling with anticipation. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some cheering for the veterans, others whispering about Carter's humiliation. Sam's eyes met Martinez's, and for a moment he saw Tommy in her steely gaze, a reminder that he wasn't forgotten, that his fight wasn't over. But Carter wasn't backing down yet. He squared his shoulders, his voice rising. "You can't just storm in here and—" Before he could finish, a new sound cut through the chaos. A sharp, authoritative voice from the mall's upper level, echoing down like judgment. "We're on the edge of the climax now. What happens next will turn everything upside down. You can't miss the resolution of this story. Stay with it to see how Sam's fight unfolds." The sharp, authoritative voice from the mall's upper level sliced through the chaos like a commanding officer's order on a battlefield. "Enough!" it boomed, reverberating off the glass storefronts and silencing the murmurs of the crowd. Sam Whitaker, still clutching the faded photograph of his fallen friend Tommy, looked up, his heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and defiance. The food court, thick with the scents of fried dough and spilled soda, felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Officer Carter, his face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment, froze mid-sentence, his hand hovering over his radio as if debating whether to call for backup. The crowd, shoppers, teenagers, and a handful of veterans who'd formed a protective semicircle around Sam, turned as one, their eyes drawn to the source of the voice. Striding down the escalator was a man in a crisp suit, his silver hair and ramrod-straight posture marking him as someone who'd seen command. It was General Robert Callahan, a retired Marine Corps officer and local legend, known for his advocacy for veterans' rights. His presence was a force, his polished shoes clicking against the tiles as he descended, flanked by two younger men in VFW jackets, their faces grim with purpose. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, phones still recording, capturing every second of the escalating drama. Sam's breath hitched. He didn't know Callahan personally, but he'd heard the name, seen the man's face on local news, rallying for veterans' health care and respect. The sight of him now, cutting through the mall like a tank through a war zone, sparked something deep in Sam's chest. A flicker of hope, tempered by years of disillusionment. Callahan's eyes locked onto Carter, who shrank under the weight of that gaze. "You," Callahan said, his voice low but carrying the weight of decades in uniform. "Are you the one harassing a decorated veteran?" The question wasn't just an accusation. It was a challenge, delivered with the precision of a sniper's shot. Carter stammered, his earlier bravado crumbling. He was loitering, sir. I was just doing my job." The excuse sounded hollow even to the teenagers in the crowd who'd stopped laughing and were now whispering nervously. Colonel Elena Martinez, the retired Marine who'd led the group of veterans into the mall, stepped forward, her Marine Corps pin glinting under the lights. "Your job?" she snapped. "Your job is to protect people, not shove them around for sitting on a damn bench." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some cheering, others nodding in agreement. A woman in a sundress, holding a shopping bag, shouted, "He's right! That man didn't do anything wrong!" Her voice was a spark, igniting the crowd's sentiment. A man in a trucker hat yelled, "Shame on you!" And soon a chant rippled through the food court. "Let him stay! Let him stay!" Sam's hands trembled around Tommy's photograph, the edges worn smooth from years of handling. He felt the weight of the moment, the eyes of strangers and comrades alike, and for the first time that day he didn't feel invisible. But the sting of Carter's shove, the echo of "old man," still burned in his chest, mingling with memories of Vietnam, of nights spent wondering if he'd ever make it home, of Tommy's last smile before a bullet stole him away. Callahan raised a hand, silencing the crowd with a single gesture. He turned to Sam, his expression softening but still carrying the weight of authority. "Sergeant Whitaker," he said, his voice steady, "I know your record. Purple Heart, Vietnam, 68. You carried your squad through hell and back. You don't deserve this." Sam's throat tightened, the general's words hitting harder than Carter's shove. How did he know? The crowd's chatter faded and Sam felt a memory surface. 1969, dragging a wounded Marine to safety, his own leg bleeding, Tommy's voice in his ear. "Keep going, Sam. You're stronger than you know." Now, decades later, that strength stirred again, fueled by the general's recognition. Callahan turned back to Carter, who was visibly sweating now, his uniform seeming to shrink around him. "This man," Callahan said, gesturing to Sam, "fought for your freedom to stand here and wear that badge, and you repay him with disrespect." The crowd roared, a wave of applause and cheers swelling around them. The veterans tightened their formation, their boots scuffing the tiles as they closed ranks, forming a human wall behind Sam. There were nearly 200 of them now. Word had spread through VFW networks, local veteran groups, and social media, drawing more to the scene. Their presence was a silent promise. "We've got your back." Carter's eyes darted to the crowd, then to Callahan, then to the veterans, whose stares were unrelenting. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The mall's manager, a nervous woman in a blazer, hurried over, her heels clicking frantically. "Officer Carter, stand down," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "This is unacceptable." Carter's shoulders slumped, his hand dropping from his radio. The crowd cheered louder, and Sam felt a tear slip down his cheek. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Callahan stepped forward, extending a hand to Sam. "Sergeant," he said, his voice warm but commanding, "on behalf of this community, I apologize. You're welcome here, always." Sam took the hand, his grip firm despite the ache in his joints, and stood, the crowd erupting in applause. He held Tommy's photo close, feeling his friend's presence in the moment. The general turned to the crowd, raising Sam's hand like a victor's. "This is what a hero looks like," he declared, and the cheers grew deafening. The manager, red-faced, promised a public apology and a review of security protocols, while Carter slunk away, his badge no longer a shield but a weight. As the veterans surrounded Sam, offering handshakes and stories of their own, he felt a warmth he hadn't known since the war, a sense of brotherhood, of purpose. He looked down at Tommy's photograph, whispering, "We did it, buddy." The crowd began to disperse, but not before a young girl, no older than 10, slipped through and handed Sam a small American flag from a nearby display. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but clear. Sam nodded, his heart full, the flag a symbol of everything he'd fought for. The mall's fluorescent lights seemed brighter now, the air lighter. Sam stood taller, his pain forgotten, his doubts silenced. He wasn't just an old man on a bench. He was a Marine, a survivor, a hero, and today the world remembered.